I met my husband, Ethan, in our late 20s, and we fell in love fast. 2 years later, we got married, and since then, our life has been everything I ever wanted, peaceful, loving, and full of laughter. Our son, Oliver, is 5 now, and he's our world. Ethan and I always prided ourselves on our strong relationship. We trusted each other completely. I thought nothing could shake our little family until Melanie decided to throw a grenade into it. Melanie, Ethan's sister, had never liked me. She never said it outright, but I felt it in every backhanded compliment, every sharp glance. The tension had been there since the day we met, simmering beneath forced smiles and polite conversation. At her wedding, she had all the bridesmaids wear cream-colored dresses, then threw a tantrum because I stood out too much and was trying to steal attention. Never mind that she chose the color scheme. That was Melanie, always finding a way to make herself the victim. She made little digs whenever she could. If I got a new dress, she'd say, "Oh, I saw that one last season, brave choice." If Oliver hit a milestone, she'd find a way to downplay it, comparing him to her own son, Zach. I learned to brush it off. Ethan told me not to let her get to me. "She's just like that with everyone," he'd say. But this past Christmas, Melanie took things too far. We were all gathered at Ethan's parents' house, the air thick with the smell of pine, cinnamon, and roasted turkey. The kids were ripping through their presents, paper flying everywhere. Oliver's face lit up as he tore open a small box. Inside was a DNA test kit. "Oh wow," he beamed. "What's this?" Melanie sat across the room, sipping her wine with a smirk. "It's a DNA test, sweetheart. You can find out all about your family history." Ethan stiffened beside me. My stomach twisted. Something about the way she said it, that smirk. At first, I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe it really was just an innocent gift. Oliver did love science. But then, later that evening, Ethan pulled me aside, his jaw tight. "Melanie was making weird comments to me earlier," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "She kept saying things like, 'The truth always comes out,' and 'It'll be interesting to see the results.'" Cold dread spread through me. I knew exactly what she was implying. Oliver had green eyes. Ethan and I both had brown. Anyone with a basic grasp of genetics knows that recessive traits can skip generations, but Melanie had been making passive-aggressive remarks about it for years. This was her trying to plant seeds of doubt in Ethan's mind. I wanted to storm over and throw the damn test in her smug face. But Ethan grabbed my wrist. "She's not worth it," he said, his voice low but firm. "We know the truth. We know Oliver is mine." He was right. So we let Oliver take the test, because we had nothing to hide. He was excited, completely unaware of the tension brewing beneath the surface. We helped him with the process and sent off the kit. And that should have been the end of it. But then Zach, Melanie's 14-year-old son, got curious. "That's so cool," he said, watching Oliver with interest. "I want to do one too." Trevor, Melanie's husband, chuckled. "Why not? It'll be a fun little family project." Melanie's smile faltered for the briefest second. A flicker of something panic crossed her face. Looking back, I wonder if she knew, even then, that everything was about to fall apart. The results came in a few weeks later. I was in the kitchen, making lunch, when I heard Ethan curse under his breath. I turned to see him staring at his phone, his face unreadable. "The results came back," he said, voice tight. My stomach clenched. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and walked over. "And?" He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. "Oliver is mine. No question." Relief flooded through me, even though I'd never doubted it. Still, seeing it in black and white, knowing Melanie's little scheme had failed, it felt good. But Ethan didn't look relieved. He looked tense. "What's wrong?" I asked, my pulse picking up again. He hesitated. Zach's results came back too. Something in his tone made my chest tighten. Ethan swallowed hard. "Trevor isn't his father." For a second, I thought I'd misheard. I stared at him. "What?" Ethan nodded, rubbing his jaw. "Zach isn't Trevor's biological son." My breath caught in my throat. This was huge. Melanie, who had spent years making sly little comments about Oliver's paternity, had been hiding this. "Does Trevor know?" I asked. Ethan shook his head. "Not yet. Zach got the email first. He didn't really get what he was looking at, so he showed it to Melanie." Ethan let out a dry laugh, shaking his head. "She freaked. Started saying the test was wrong, that these things aren't always accurate." I scoffed. "Oh, now she questions DNA tests?" Ethan gave me a look, but I was too furious to stop myself. She was ready to blow up our marriage over a damn Christmas present, but now that it's her family on the line, She suddenly doesn't trust science? Ethan sighed. Zach wasn't buying it. He kept pushing. And then Trevor overheard. I shut my eyes. Jesus. Yeah. What did Melanie do? She tried to brush it off, said Zach was misreading the numbers or something. Ethan ran a hand down his face. Trevor asked to see the results himself, and Zach just handed him his phone. I could picture it perfectly. Trevor standing there, scrolling through the results. The way his face must have drained of color. He locked himself in their bedroom, Ethan said. Hasn't come out since. A heavy silence stretched between us. Is Zach okay? I asked finally. Ethan hesitated. I don't think it's hit him yet. He knows something's wrong, but I don't think he's fully processed what this means. I exhaled shakily, gripping the edge of the counter. Do you think Trevor's gonna leave her? Ethan was quiet for a long time. If I were him? His voice was low. I wouldn't stay. A shiver ran through me. Melanie had spent years trying to make me feel like I didn't belong, like I wasn't really part of their family. And now? Her own lies were the ones tearing her family apart. Melanie showed up at my house the next day. No call, no text, just banged on my front door like the world was ending. I barely had time to react before she pushed past me, stepping into the living room. She looked wrecked. Her hair was a mess, eyes red and puffy like she'd been crying for hours. She wasn't wearing makeup, which was shocking on its own. Melanie never let anyone see her looking less than perfect. I need your help, she blurted. Please. I crossed my arms, heart still racing from the way she barged in. Help with what? She turned to face me, eyes wide with desperation. Trevor won't talk to me. He won't look at me. Zach, he hates me. And I don't know what to do. I let out a slow breath, trying to keep my voice steady. Melanie, I don't know what you expect me to say. Her lips parted, like she couldn't believe I wasn't immediately rushing to comfort her. You have to talk to Trevor, she said. Convince him this doesn't have to ruin everything. But Zach doesn't need to. She stopped abruptly, but it was too late. My stomach turned. You want me to tell Trevor to lie to his own son? Melanie hesitated. It's not. Are you serious right now? My voice rose, disbelief crashing over me. After everything? After the way you treated me? She flinched. This is different. I laughed, sharp and humorless. Different how? You were ready to tear my marriage apart over a DNA test. And now you want me to help you hide the truth. Tears welled in her eyes. For a second, I thought she might actually apologize. Instead, she snapped. You think you're so much better than me, she spat. I scoffed. Melanie. You love this, don't you? She hissed, stepping closer. Watching my life fall apart. I clenched my jaw. You did this to yourself. Her nostrils flared. You're a snake. And you're a liar, I shot back. And guess what? Lies catch up to you. She sucked in a sharp breath, chest heaving. Then, without another word, she turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I stood there for a long moment, my hands clenched into fists, my pulse roaring in my ears. Melanie's perfect world was crumbling, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Trevor finally broke his silence 3 days later. Ethan got a text from him late at night, just 2 words. I know. That was it. No explanation, no context. Just those 2 words, sitting on Ethan's phone like a ticking bomb. Ethan called him immediately. It rang twice before Trevor picked up. His voice was hoarse, like he hadn't slept. I'm leaving her. I felt a sharp pang in my chest. Not because I felt bad for Melanie, but because this was real. The unraveling of a marriage. The destruction of a family. Ethan didn't say anything for a moment, just let the words settle. Are you sure? Trevor let out a dry, humorless laugh. I haven't been sure about anything in years. But this? Yeah, I'm sure. I sat beside Ethan on the couch, listening to the weight in Trevor's voice. The exhaustion. The heartbreak. She knew, Trevor continued, his voice tight. She knew for years, Ethan. Ethan met my eyes. Neither of us were surprised, but hearing it from Trevor made it hit. I don't even know who I've been married to, Trevor said. I've spent the last 14 years building a life with a woman who he cut himself off, exhaling shakily. And Zach. God, Zach. I shut my eyes, picturing him. 14 years old, thinking he had a solid, stable family. And then, just like that, everything was a lie. Is he okay? I asked softly. Trevor hesitated. He's angry, confused, won't talk to Melanie. He barely talks to me. I don't know how to help him. Ethan rubbed his face. He needs time, man. I don't have time, Trevor snapped, frustration bubbling under his grief. Melanie's already spinning this. telling him I'm the bad guy for leaving, saying I don't love him anymore. I clenched my fists. Of course she was. Trevor inhaled sharply. She wants joint custody. I felt Ethan tense beside me. You think she deserves that? No, Trevor's voice was flat. But I can't just take the kids away from her, Ethan. No court would let me. And honestly, Zach wants to stay with me. That made sense. Zach wasn't stupid. He knew who had lied to him, who had betrayed his trust. But there was still Lily, 7 years old, too young to fully understand what was happening. She doesn't even know, Trevor said, like he could read my thoughts. Melanie hasn't told her. She thinks I'm just mad at her mom for some reason. A lump formed in my throat. That little girl had no idea what was coming. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. What are you going to do? Trevor let out a long, shaky breath. Fight for them. I don't care what it takes. I won't let her mess them up more than she already has. I knew then, this wasn't just a man leaving his wife. This was a war. And Melanie? She wasn't the type to surrender quietly. The fallout was worse than I expected. Melanie wasn't going down without a fight. The very next morning, she started damage control, posting cryptic, pitiful messages on Facebook about betrayal and people turning against family. She made herself the victim, playing up the poor abandoned wife narrative for sympathy. Trevor didn't respond. He stayed quiet, focused. But Zach saw everything. That afternoon, Ethan got a call from him. Can I come over? Zach's voice was small, hesitant. Not like him. Of course, Bud, Ethan said immediately. When Zach arrived, he looked hollow, like he hadn't slept, like he wasn't even fully there. He sat on our couch, staring at his hands, barely speaking. Oliver ran up to him, excited like always, but Zach just gave him a weak smile. I hated seeing him like this. Zach, I said gently. Have you talked to your dad? He nodded. Yeah. I waited, giving him space to say more. He exhaled. Mom keeps saying it's all a mistake, that the test was wrong. I swallowed down my anger. And do you think it's wrong? He shook his head. No, his voice wavered. I don't know what to believe anymore. My heart broke for him. She lied to me, he whispered. For years. Ethan sat beside him, voice steady. That wasn't your fault, Zach. Zach nodded slowly, but I could tell it wasn't sinking in yet. It would take time. Then, suddenly, he looked up. She won't tell Lily. I stilled. What? She won't tell her, he said again, his fist clenching. She says it doesn't matter. That Lily doesn't need to know. Rage boiled in my chest. Your dad. He's trying, Zach cut in. He says we'll figure it out. But Mom keeps getting in Lily's head. Keeps telling her that Dad is being mean. That he's leaving us. His jaw tightened. She's lying to her. I exchanged a look with Ethan. Melanie was doing what she did best, twisting the truth to make herself look like the victim. And Lily? Lily was too young to see through it. Trevor had a custody hearing coming up. We all knew Melanie would fight tooth and nail to keep as much control as possible. But then something happened that changed everything. That night, we got a call from Trevor. She confessed, he said, his voice shaking. I blinked. What? She admitted it, Trevor said. Not just to me. To Lily. My breath caught. How? She slipped up. He sounded stunned, like he still couldn't believe it. Apparently, Melanie had been drinking. And in a moment of frustration, in the middle of an argument with Trevor, she snapped. You're not even his real dad, she had yelled. Right in front of Lily. The second the words left her mouth, she froze. Lily burst into tears. Zach, furious, protective, immediately turned on Melanie. Screamed at her. Trevor told me later that Zach had never spoken to his mother like that before. And Melanie? She fell apart. Sobbing. Apologizing. Trying to take it back. But it was too late. The next day, Lily wouldn't even look at her. And in the custody hearing, Trevor finally had proof that Melanie wasn't fit to have full custody. The judge ruled in Trevor's favor. Primary custody his. Melanie still had visitation rights, but it was limited. Supervised, even, until Lily had time to adjust. Melanie was devastated. And Zach? He decided to live with Trevor full-time. The last time I saw Melanie, she looked like a ghost of herself. Sunken eyes, unbrushed hair, like the weight of everything had finally crushed her. She didn't speak to me. Didn't even look at me. Just walked past, silent. Maybe she finally realized this wasn't my fault. This was hers. Her own lies, her own cruelty, had come back to destroy her. And now, she had to live with it.